All right, I wanted to just do a video on section 13.4 and 13.5. So with 13.4, let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. All right, so a loan for a substantial amount over a long time period for the purpose of getting a home or other property or real estate, and for which the property is pledged as security for the loan, meaning if you default, they can take your house to get the amount that you borrowed. That's a mortgage. Okay? Sometimes called a deed of trust or a security deed. All right, the time until the payoff, the final payoff, is called the term of the mortgage. Right, and then you'll put down what's called a down payment. So that'll be the part of the purchase price that you're going to pay initially. You usually pay it at closing, right? And then the rest that you're borrowing, that's the principal amount or the principal of the loan. So you don't borrow the whole entire purchase price. You have to make a down payment, and then you usually finance the rest. All right, now there's two kinds of mortgages we're going to be looking at. One of them is called a fixed rate mortgage. The other is an adjustable rate. Okay, so with a fixed rate mortgage, the interest rate remains constant throughout the term, and the initial principal balance, along with the interest that you owe, is all going to be paid back to the lender using a set amount, usually every month. Okay, and you can figure out what that payment is going to be by doing something we call amortizing. So the process of determining that regular payment is called amortizing the loan. Okay, and then what the regular payment turns out to be depends on, of course, how much you borrowed, how long you're going to have the loan, and what the interest rate was. So fixed rate mortgages are great when the interest rates are low, because you kind of lock in that interest rate and you're going to have that forever until you pay off the loan. But then, sometimes the interest rate's really high, so it'd be good to be able to have a, you might need to refinance or something like that, because you don't want to have a fixed high interest rate if the interest rates start dropping down the road. Okay, so here's a formula. And one of the things you really want to work on is making sure that you can get the accurate value, that you can use your calculator correctly to get the accurate value once you plug everything in. So the first problem here says to use that formula to get the monthly payment necessary to amortize an $80,000 mortgage at 6% interest for 25 years. So the formula is taking into account a lot of things, and you're going to use it to determine what your regular payment would need to be so that at the end of 25 years, you've paid off this $80,000 mortgage. So let's plug everything in where it belongs. So R is what the payment will be. P is 80,000. The R is the annual interest rate. Change it to a decimal though, so put a 0.06. We do divide by 12 because we're going to do the usual, which is a monthly payment. Then all of that gets divided by 1 minus 12 over 12 plus the interest rate of 6%. Okay, and then all of that is getting raised to the 12 times the years, the 25, right there. All right, now you have to be careful when you enter this, especially if you're going to enter it in one step. Okay, because this grouping symbol right here means all of this gets worked out. So you'll need to start with a parenthesis. Then you'll have to put in another set of parentheses. I'm going to change to green for this one. Okay, then you're going to need another set of parentheses. Let me change it to blue for this one down here, because here's another grouping symbol. Okay. All right, then you're going to want to close that one. And then even all of this needs to be grouped right here when you're entering it in one step. And then you'll need a final parenthesis. All right, so you just got to be so careful. So I recommend you go ahead and work this part, this 12 times 25 out, and get that value. Have that already figured out. So when you get around to entering it, you'll just put in what 12 times 25 turns out to be, which is 300. So this piece right here is 300. All right, so if you are going to try to enter it in one step, it's harder than you think. So I kind of recommend you do the whole top part, keep a lot of accuracy, hang on to that, then figure out the whole bottom part, and then divide the two. If you are going to try to do it in one step, you should be thinking this. Well, you really don't, it doesn't matter so much about the numerator on this one. So it would be okay to do that. But after that division sign, this is how mine does it. It does it in kind of one long line. I would have to put the left parenthesis. Then I could do the 1 minus. Then I'd have to put a parenthesis, the green one. Then I would put in the 12 divided by. Then I need to put in another parenthesis. So you can see it would be just real nightmare. So you decide how you're going to do it. You work at this until you can figure it out. 12 plus 0.06. Okay, so I'm going to close that one. But then I also have to close the green one. And then that portion gets raised. Just that piece gets raised. And here's where you want to just put in 300. Don't put in 12 times 25. Okay. All right, and then that's the whole entire denominator. So that should work. So I'm going to enter it just like I just showed you. You might have a calculator that sets things up with fractions that are written above one another. Okay, so you have a little bit of an advantage over me. But you may have a calculator that doesn't do that. So just make sure you know how to use your calculator. So try it right now. I'm giving you time to do it while I'm doing it as well. And we'll see if we both get what we're supposed to. Okay, so if you did it right, you should get this to be around $515.44. And you typically are going to be, throughout this whole thing, rounding to the hundreds place because it's money. We're talking dollars and cents. All right. Now, the thing is, even though we can do that to figure out what the regular monthly payment would need to be in order to pay off that loan in 25 years at 6% interest, there's other ways to do it. There are calculators designed for this. There's spreadsheets. And sometimes we use a table where somebody else has already calculated the information. Now, the hard part about this table is the table tells you what the payment would be if you borrowed $1,000. But you typically borrow tens of thousands, right? You don't just borrow 1,000. So you have to understand how to utilize the table. So we're going to do the same problem, but we're going to use the table to get the payment necessary for the same information, but we're going to use the table to find the payment, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to take that 6% and you're going to take that 25 years and you're going to look for where those two intersect, and you get the 6.44301. So if you only borrowed $1,000, then your payment would be $6.44 about every month for 25 years, okay? But you didn't borrow just 1,000, you borrowed 80,000. So you need to multiply that by 80. And you'll see when you do that, take a moment to do it. Pause the video, take a moment to do it. And you wind up getting the same thing, $515.44. So that's what your monthly payment would be, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and look at this part of it. Let's see if I can get it to show. There we go. So let's talk about this piece. Like when you do take out a loan, you can think about these regular payments you're making, and you can see how much of your payment is going towards the paying off the loan amount and how much of it is going for interest, which is basically going to the bank, okay, for the privilege of you borrowing the money. So in the beginning of your loan, almost all of your payment goes towards interest. Very little is going to pay off the principal. All right, so let me show you how this works. We'll only be expected to do just a few payments just to kind of see how it works. So we're going to use this chart, and we'll utilize it in a minute, to take the monthly payment and figure out what portion of the payment goes for interest, what goes for principal, okay? So we're going to be using these steps that you see right below it. Let me raise that up and squeeze this in a little bit so you can see the chart. So we're going to take that same information we had, the $80,000 mortgage and all, and we're going to look at that payment and kind of calculate what part of the payment's going for interest and what part's going for principal. Okay. All right. So we already know our total payment on that one. We did it a couple of times. If not, we would figure it out. But it was $515.44. So that's what our payment is. And this is a fixed rate mortgage. So our payment's going to be that for every month. What changes is what portion of that payment is going to pay off the principal. So here's what we're going to do then. We're going to calculate what the interest is for that first month. Okay, so we're going to take our balance, which we haven't paid any of it off. So our old balance is what we owe, the $80,000. Our interest rate is 6%, but that's an annual interest rate. So we're going to multiply that by a 12th or divide by 12. It's the same concept. And what that is going to give us is what the interest would be for the month. Okay. So we're going to take that 80,000 times the 0.06 times the 1/12, and we get 400. So that 400 that I just got, that is the interest, a portion of the payment that is going to cover the interest. Well, then that must mean that the rest of it, so this is the interest for the month, okay, the principal payment, I'll call it the principal part, and let me call this one the interest part. Okay, so this was part B. Now I'm working on C. To get the part of the payment that goes for principal, I'm going to be taking the $515 payment and subtracting the interest, and that means that $115.44 is going towards, I don't know why I wrote that way, $115.44 is going towards paying off my loan. So that would be C, $115.44. Well, you know, our balance was $80,000. We've now paid off the $115.44. So work on that, pause the video and do it. So that means we're going to have $79,884.56 left to pay off. Okay. All right, so now we're going to work on F. So to get F, we're going to wind up taking the amount left, the principal we owe, multiply by our interest rate, divide by 12, or multiply by a 12, and that's going to give us the amount of our payment that goes to pay off the interest during the second month. So it's almost the same, a little bit less goes towards interest, which means a little bit more is going towards the principal. So we would subtract $399.42 from the $514 and would get $116.02. Right? Does that make sense? So you take the G, for G, you take the payment and you subtract the amount going for interest, and that's going to give you the amount that's being used to pay down the principal. All right, so now I'm going to take that old 79 that we had, that old $79,884.54 56 and subtract the 116.02. So I now owe, after the second month, I owe $79,768.54. Okay, and we could keep that up, and there's like spreadsheets that'll do all that for us. We could program all these formulas so we can have just this big list where that's called an amortization schedule that shows us all of the payments we make, the 12 payments we make for every one of those 25, for every month in those 25 years. We can see how much is going towards interest and how much is going towards paying off the principal. Okay? All right, so now let's look at these two questions. All right, this one says to get the monthly payment. We can use either the formula or table 1. So basically use the table unless you can't find the interest rate. So you see here, this one's in the table, so we could use the table for it, but 5.2 is not in the table. So we're going to have to use the formula. And if you like the formula, you can use it every time. All right, so we're going to set up the formula. So you go back to that R formula and you plug everything in. So it should be $145,000. And then we're going to take our interest rate written as a decimal, divided by 12. Then in the denominator, we do 1 minus. Then we have parenthesis 12 divided by 12 plus the 0.052. That's got to be raised to the 12 times, in this case, 25 again, power. So work on that and see. Okay, pause the video and try it. You should get $864, in this case, and 64 cents. Okay. But luckily on the next one, I can use the table. I need to look for 20 years and 5.5 in that table. So I'm going to go back to the table. I'm going to look for 5.5. Let me change colors here. 5.5 and 20, right? So I'm looking for 5.5 and 20. So that's 6.87887. 6 point. So from the table, I get 6.87887. So that's supposed to be the payment if I had borrowed $1,000. I borrowed $200,000. So I'm going to multiply by 200. And when I do, I get about $1,375.77. And I would get the same thing if I used the formula, but the table is just so much easier. So that would be the preferred way to do it. Okay? And then we're going to do here one more amortization schedule. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 5. Now this one I'm doing for a couple of reasons. I wanted you to see how to handle $143,200. What do you do about that extra little 200? So first off, 6.5 and 15, that's in the table. So let's go back to the table and get the factor that would help us get the monthly payment, because we weren't given that. Okay, wait, I already forgot what it was. 6.5, 15 years. So here's 6.5, 15 years. So 8.71107. 8.71107. All right, now here's the deal. I need to rewrite that to say how many thousands it is. So it's 143.2 thousand. See, take that, if you're wondering where that came from, divide by 1,000. 143.2 thousand is what that is, what that means. Okay, so we're just going to take that 8.71107 and multiply it by 143.2, and what we get is about $1,247.43. Okay. All right, so what that is this regular monthly payment we're going to do for every month for 15 years. Okay, so we know that part. Now we're going to do like we did before to see what portion of the payment goes towards the principal, goes towards interest, what portion goes to the principal. So you start with your loan amount and you multiply that by the interest rate as a decimal, and then you divide by 12 or multiply by 1/12. All right, when you do that, you get about $775.67. So that's the amount of that payment that is going towards interest. Okay, so your payment was $1,247.43. If this much is going to pay off, or going for interest, then that leaves you with $471.76. Okay, so that means $471.76 is going to pay off some of the amount you owe. Not much. So you take your amount of your principal and you subtract that 471 because you're starting to pay off your principal, right? So a little bit goes to cover the amount of your loan. Okay. And so we wind up with that being about, after we do that, we get 1,427,2824. Okay, $142,728. $142,728.24. And then we just do that sequence of steps one more time. But this time we're starting with our new balance. We've paid off a little bit. And so when we multiply by the 0.065 divided by 12, we get a different amount. We're going to be paying about $773.11 in interest, which means out of that payment we had, once we pay that interest off, that's going to tell us how much is left from that payment, which is $474.32, and that's going to be going towards paying off the amount we owe. So at the end of that second month, I'm going to be down a little bit. I'm going to have just $142,253.92 left to pay. Now this schedule could be continued to payment 3, payment 4, and so on until we finish all 180 payments. Okay. All right, so that's the fixed rate examples. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the adjustable rate ones. So I'm going to move to the adjustable rate section. Okay, a lot of the calculations and all are going to be the same once you understand what adjustable rate mortgages do. Okay, so we're going to fill this in real quick. All right, so an adjustable rate mortgage. Okay, sometimes it's called an ARM. Stands for adjustable rate mortgage. It's also known sometimes as a variable rate mortgage, VRM. It generally starts out with a little bit lower rate than on the fixed rate loans, okay, but the rate changes periodically. It's variable, okay. It depends on what's going on in the economy at the time, okay. So the interest rate can change. It may change every 1 year or every 3 years or every 5. How often it changes, okay, that's called the adjustment period. Okay, so when this rate changes, your payment's going to change. Okay, the adjustments are typically made by fluctuations in an interest rate that your loan is based on. It's called the index. A lot of times it'll be the Treasury index, so some index that's part of the federal government. All right, so to determine your interest rate with an adjustable rate, what happens is the lender is going to take this index, this base rate, and they're going to add some percentage points to it. And what they add to it is called the margin. So the index and the margin are then used to come up with what your interest rate is overall. And what they do to get the margin depends probably on your credit score. It might be maybe a home builder is trying to encourage people to buy these houses, so they might have a very low margin. So there's various factors used to figure out what your interest rate is. They take the base index rate and then they add to it some percentage points. All right, so sometimes your initial rates that are offered are less than the sum of the index and the margin. Okay, so sometimes the rate isn't just the index and the margin added, you get a discount. And the discount, this is actually where the buyer, the builder, sometimes comes into play. So sometimes the builder is anxious to sell and they'll offer a discount. So that'll lower your interest rate. It makes the loan more favorable to you. All right, now, it can be super scary to think about this. If your interest rate is adjustable, so who's to say, why can't they just raise it an incredible amount every time they can? Well, that's part of the terms of your loan. That's part of what's written into the loan. So you want to check on that, right? So there'll be an interest rate cap that's going to limit the amount your interest rate can increase. Right? And there's a periodic cap which limits how much the rate can increase from one adjustment period to the next. So like sometimes your rate could be adjusted every year. Okay. And so it might have in the loan that the interest rate can't go up more than 1% or more than 2% a year. Right. And then an overall cap limits how much the rate can increase over the life of the loan. Okay. All right, so some adjustable rate mortgages also have payment caps. Okay, so this limits how much the payment can increase at each adjustment. Okay, so maybe they base it on, okay, we don't want your payment to go up more than $50 each adjustment. So because of this, there are these times when your payment might not cover the interest you owe. You actually owe more principal at the end of the adjustment period than you did at the beginning, okay, which is weird but can happen. And that's a situation called negative amortization. So you wind up like having money added to your principal because you weren't able to, your payment was not allowed to get big enough to cover how much you owed in interest. Okay. Now, just a couple other things before we work some problems. You might, if you're going to get an adjustable rate mortgage, you might want to check on whether you can convert it to a fixed rate. A convertibility feature. Okay. This is going to let you change it to a fixed rate mortgage. So maybe the interest rates are on their way up and you decide, oops, I'd rather just lock in at the rate I have. There might be a way to do that. Right. Then the other thing is sometimes there's a prepayment penalty where if you pay your loan off early, you actually wind up having to still pay more of the interest. So it's good to check and see if you can get one that has no prepayment penalty. So if you come upon, you get some money and you can pay off your loan, you might choose to do that. Okay. Early, if there's no prepayment penalty, if you're not going to be charged more for that. All right, now the thing is, The way you work these problems is pretty much the same as how you work the fixed rate problems. Like this formula is no different. And table 1. It's nothing different about table 1. What's going to be different is that your interest rate might be adjusted during the loan. Okay. So let's do a couple problems with adjustable rate stuff. All right. So number 6 says that we have a $120,000 loan. We're taking out a 1-year adjustable rate mortgage. The 1 year just means it has the potential of adjusting the interest rate every year for 30 years. The lender is using the Treasury Index, okay, and it says that was 4.5%, and then there's a 2% margin. Your job is to get your monthly payment for the first year. So you start out just like you did before. The difference is that you need the overall interest rate. Okay. Overall interest rate. So you're going to take the 4.5% and you're going to add the margin to it to get your interest rate. So it's 6.5%. Okay. Then you're going to look at the time, 30 years. So then you're going to see if 6.5 and 30 is in the table. I believe it is. So we'll go up to the table. We need 6.5 with 30 years. So that would be here, 6.32068. So 6.32068. We're going to multiply that. Since this is 120,000, we're going to multiply it by 120 because that, remember, is the payment on a $1,000 loan. And it's like you're taking out 120 of those. So then you'll multiply those. And what you wind up with on that is going to be around 700 and something. Let's see, 6.32068. You should be working it out. Most problems in this have to do with not evaluating the formula correctly. So it turns out to be about $758.48 for that first payment. And that would be the payment until your terms of your mortgage allowed them to adjust the rate, and then it might go up or down based on the new index. All right, so that's kind of what's happening in question number 7. So let's understand this problem. So here we have an adjustable rate mortgage with some terms given to us, and we're supposed to get the initial payment and then what the payment would be after the first adjustment, and then comment on what the change between the two of those is. Okay, so we start out with the doing the problem the same way. We take these two, the 2.2 and the 2.8, that's 5%. Okay. So we're doing 30 years, 5%. So we get that factor. And to get our monthly payment, we're going to take the 150 times what we get out of that table. So go back to that table. This should be the number you get for 5% interest, 30 years. Okay. So then you multiply those two. And this is from table 1 right here. Multiply those two and we get 805.23. Okay. All right, that's A. So that's how we do A. That's our initial monthly payment. But here's the deal. This particular adjustable rate mortgage, what this 3.1 means is it adjusts for the first time after 3 years, and then it can adjust every year after that. So it's asking us, after the first adjustment, what will our monthly payment be? Okay, so they help us out a little bit. We'll still have that same margin, right? So still have that same margin, but our new interest rate, our new rate will be the new adjusted index rate plus the margin that we agreed on. Okay. So that's going to wind up being 4. That's going to be 5.4%. Okay. 5.4 is not in the table. All right. The other thing is the time left to pay, time remaining, would equal, it was 30 to start with, but this adjustment happened after 3 years. So we're going to have 27 more years to pay. Now, we would have had to, we can't do it. In order to do the problem, we would have to know how much money is left to pay off. So they had to give that to us here. Otherwise, we would have had to do, our payment is $805.23 the first month. We would have had to see, okay, how much principal is left after that first month. Okay. And then we'd have to do the second month, the third month, and we'd have to do that for 36 months, the 3 years. And after we do that for 36 months, those 3 years, we would get this adjusted balance. So they recognize that we can't do that. So we get to just use this for the adjusted balance. That's like the new principal. That's like the new principal amount. So that's the way to think about it. So you're going to go in and put in the $143,015.49. Put in your new interest rate, which is annual, so you have to divide by 12. Then down here, we're going to do that formula, right? And all of that gets raised to the 12 times the number of years, but we're going to be putting 27 now instead of 30 because we've already paid on this for 3 years, right? And so after we do that, we'll have our new monthly payment, and it'll turn out to be $839.58, I think. 839, can't read my writing, but I think it's 58. Okay. All right, so that's the answer to B, the new monthly payment. That's B. Then C says, okay, so what happened? Well, our new one is this, and our old one was $805.23. So that means we had $34.35. That our new payment is $34.35 more than the old one. Okay. All right, then we're just going to touch on a couple other things related to mortgages. When you wind up buying a house, okay, you put in an offer, it's accepted, you get an inspection done and some other things. And then they set a date for what they call the closing. That's when you come and you kind of settle up. You pay what you need to pay that day, and you get all your loan all set up, ready to go, and that sort of thing. Okay, so on closing, it is kind of a day when you really, it's a lot actually. You have to pay a whole lot on that day. All right, and what's going to happen is all these various things are going to be paid for, like they do a title search to make sure no one else owns a piece of your property. Okay, and then you have to pay the title company, and then there's going to be fees for them doing the document and doing the research and all that kind of thing. All right, so these charges altogether are called the closing costs. Okay, right, and a lot of them are like amounts that are set by them. Some of them are done as percentages of your mortgage. All right, and like when they record the deed at the courthouse, there's a fee for that. There's a lot of different fees that you pay. All right, you typically also pay your down payment at closing, which is typically significant, tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, so that often happens at closing as well. All right, and then there's this other fee that you often pay at closing, this loan origination fee. All right, a lot of times it's 1% of your mortgage. You need to calculate that. So if we're doing a problem where the mortgage is $85,000, if you do 1% of that, okay, that's going to wind up being $850, and that's on top of some of these other things. Okay, so what we would do for this problem is just add all these up, and we'd wind up with $3,705 in closing costs. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's all you pay that day. You also usually pay your first month. You usually pay your down payment that day. Okay. So you have to come up with a lot of money that day. All right, so that loan origination fee is actually what they call a point. And these points, it's actually like you're paying your interest ahead of time is what it is. So each point amounts to 1% of the mortgage amount. And so when they have these points, what they'll do sometimes is you pay off those points ahead of time so that your interest rate can be less. So your interest rate can be a low thing, and then they get you by having you pay more at closing. Okay. Right now, other considerations, there's also taxes and insurance that you have to pay. Like, especially if your down payment is not very significant, you may have to have mortgage insurance. So a lot of times you have to put a 20% down payment to avoid that. And that's hard to do. Okay. So typically what we're worried about when we're buying a house is, man, how am I going to come up with the down payment? Or will I qualify for the loan? Will the bank give me a loan? Do I have enough cash and income to qualify? And then you think about your mortgage payment, right? So you'll be thinking, hey, I need to be able to have enough money to make the mortgage payment. But you also need to think about or realize that there's going to be other recurring costs. Okay, like taxes. Oh, you should have a capital on that. So taxes are collected. State and local, county ones and local ones are collected. Property taxes, mortgage interest, the property taxes and the mortgage interest are going to come off of your taxes, which is nice. But you will pay on top of your mortgage. You'll also be paying these taxes. Right? You also have to have insurance. In order to get a loan, your house has to be insured, and that can be significant. And it'll cover things like fire, storm damage, and all, but you need to be careful about that. Like, I remember in Florida, there had been so many hurricanes that I'm from Florida, that my brother had a hard time insuring his house because a lot of the insurance companies just stopped selling insurance there because of all the hurricanes. And then the other cost that you incur is maintenance costs to keep your house up. Okay, but we can't really put a finger on those because those vary so much. Okay. All right, so now let's do one more problem. So here we have a problem where this couple has a 25-year, $175,000 fixed rate loan, 7% loan, and then they owe $2,800 in annual taxes, and they have to pay $750 a year for their homeowner's insurance. And you're trying to figure out what's their net monthly expenditure related to their house. So you can first imagine that you got to get your monthly payment. So we're going to take the 25 years, 7%, and go to the table and find that factor, that 7.06779. That's what it would be for $1,000, and we're getting a loan for $175,000. So we take that factor times 175. What that gives us is the monthly house payment. Okay, but on top of that, they owe $2,800 a year. So divide that by 12. So they owe $233.33 a month for taxes, and then take the $750 in insurance and divvy that up, and that would be $62.50. And so what they pay related to their house would be the sum of those three. Now you can be off $1 or so here, depending upon rounding. Oops, that would be 11, 16, that's 710, that should be 12. Okay, so this would be 1,532.69. So really, it's not just what you get out of the table, but it's also your taxes and your insurance. Okay, and so that would be what their monthly expenditure would be. All right, I'm going to get this posted for you.